This is the former Treblinka I penal camp. The people who were brought here were brought to work on the quarry, which is to the right down there. I've done a separate video on this. What I'm now going to do is to take you to the place where the prisoners were murdered. Now, the prisoners could be selected to be killed for various reasons, but usually it was because they could no longer continue. They were completely destroyed physically and probably mentally as well. So they were brought down here. And the prisoners, when they were brought down here, this was just outside the camp, well, 500 meters, possibly a little bit more. And this being the last route, this was said to have been to humiliate them further. The camp at Treblinka I was put in the official pamphlet of laws that had been made in December 1941, although it had been in existence for several months before then. Its existence it owes to the presence of the quarry. The quarry had been operated by a private company from Lublin for several years beforehand, and they specialised in granite and in żwir, which is gravel. And when the war started and the beginning of the occupation, they had a problem finding staff. However, the Nazis didn't have such a problem. They had the people they had arrested, and the idea of running a camp such as this one at a quarry was used to strike fear into the local population. For example, we do have posters where people are warned that if they misbehave in one way or another, they could end up in Treblinka I, or Treblinka. The existence of the death camp, that came about later, but probably the death camp came about because the infrastructure of sorts was already existing here. So the quarry itself, a lot of work has been done in recent years on it, and so more and more is actually known about it. The people were put in small gangs, as you would do in a quarry anyway, and they loaded the stone and gravel onto these roller trucks, which are on the narrow gauge railway, push them up the hill, and then they tip out into a larger container, whatever, a larger truck. So that's normal sort of the way that mining or quarrying is actually done. So the camp here was designed to strike fear into people. Now, one of the things we often find, though, with Nazi ideology is that it wanted to give people physical work as such, but that physical work was often not very well organised. And so the idea of doing physical work was punishment, but the potential benefits to the Nazi state of that punishment, for example, getting extra production for even for war work, was not usually at all, it wasn't at all efficient. And I'm surprised actually that Albert Speer never came into this idea that if people were treated in a better way then and work was organised better, then it would have been more efficient for the state itself. So I think it's just a case of actual bullying. That's what they were more interested in humiliating what they considered to be the lesser races. Now, the people in this camp were largely Catholics, but there were also Jews and some of other religions as well in here. And of course, those here would have known precisely what was going on at Treblinka I. Treblinka II, I should say, of when that camp was set up in July of 1942. So this camp existed until 1944. So it was liquidated just before the Soviets actually captured this area. Before going any further, what I'll do is I'll just show you on the map where things are. So if we come down here, we've got the railway line. So I've done some videos on the railway line. So Kosów down here, that's the Małkinia, and the station at Treblinka is off up there somewhere. The death camp of Treblinka is here. And then there's this, what's called this black road, Czarna Droga, which leads to the camp, which is there. So just walked out here, for example, and there is the quarry. Done a separate video on the quarry as well. Called it here a gravel pit. So, and the place where people were executed is here. I'll read you what's written here. So, in fact, I'll read it to you and you can look at the forest. On the 23rd July, the Germans brought a group of Jews into the forest to execute them. Among the Jews were my husband, our daughter, our son and I. They escorted us up to a hole in order to lie down on our stomachs. I was thinking about how to flee. Shots were fired. My husband was fatally wounded on the head and I pressed a handkerchief against his head wound. My husband told me to flee. I took our children and ran away. Our children returned to my wounded husband. I ran into the forest and was shot in my side. I know nothing about my children's fate. That day the Nazis executed 500 to 700 people. So that was Hanya Trach, who was an inmate of this camp. The execution site was initially a cemetery where labour camp inmates who had died from starvation, exhaustion or diseases were buried. Later, inmates from the labour camp, as well as victims from the Gestapo prison in Sokołów-Podlaski and the Pawiak prison in Warsaw, were executed and buried here by the SS and Trawniki guards. Survivors report that men, women and children were shot and buried in unmarked mass graves. Poles, Jews and Romani were buried here. At the end of the Second World War, investigators found 44 mass graves and 6 individual graves in this area. Recent archaeological works have confirmed the presence of 3 more unmarked mass graves. However, the exact number of people who are killed and buried here is not known. Oh, there's something else here. There, Carnarvon's perhaps. Oh, sorry, this is English. The penal camp was formed in the summer of 1941 near an existing gravel pit. The grounds of the camp covered 17 hectares. At the initial stages of its functioning, it was Polish and then Jewish people, mainly from the Warsaw district, who interned there. They died from hunger and the inhuman system of punishment and torture. The average number of prisoners confirmed any time was between 1,000 and 2,000 people. The prisoners worked in a gravel pit at the railway station in Małkinia and at the irrigation area in the valley of the River Bug. Some of them were made to work in the camp workshop. In general, there were about 20,000 prisoners and almost half of them died or were shot. The camp ceased to exist at the end of July 1944. So one person in 2 who passed through that camp was killed. Now, the guards, often referred to as Ukrainians, that were Trawniki men. They were Soviet prisoners of war who'd gone over to help the Nazi Germans. But it needs to be pointed out that many of these people did so only to avoid starving to death, because hundreds of thousands of Soviet POWs died of starvation. Anyway, now they're often referred to as Ukrainians. Now, according to my friend Peter Black, who did some studies on this, he found that some 36% were from Ukraine. But, and this is the important thing, is that nearly all of them, of the Trawniki men, were from the Soviet Union or those territories have just been occupied by the Soviet Union, such as the Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia. This is not the first time I've been here, but last time I was here was, I think it was just after 9/11. So I remember talking to the person I was with about the buildings, if they, how new they were. So in memory of Roma and Sinti murdered by the German occupiers in the forced labour camp and the extermination camp during the Second World War, pain and suffering of the victims took the land which hides the ashes of thousands of innocent people. We bend our heads over your martyr's death. And that's from the Polish Roma Union based in Szczecinek, Council for the Protection of the Struggle and Martyrdom Sites 2014. We'll take a look at the dates of birth of some people. No, it's only got the date of death, 1943, murdered 1943, 43, 2nd of March 42, 43, 42. I was at a meeting, oh good 20 years ago, about Sobibor, and there it was decided that either everybody's name goes up on and is mentioned, or nobody's name goes up. And often in Poland, on memorials, they'll put first names because that's easier to actually find, and that way it could be that you, if you miss somebody, but like with a surname, it's it doesn't look so bad. It was often the case, particularly amongst the Jews, that they were worried that nobody would ever remember them, that this would be the end. So this has been laid out, I think, recently, although some of these crosses don't appear to be all that recent to me. I've been doing this, I've been putting up videos now for 18 years this week, and I've been doing studies on the Holocaust now for 30 years plus in Poland. But there's always new things which I find more and more shocking. And this, I'll give you two recent things. Okay, one of them's not to do with the Holocaust, but I saw something called Miasta Ruin. It was a mock-up, a 3D of what Warsaw looked like after the Warsaw uprising, the way the Nazis left it, the destruction. Even though I knew of the destruction, how much it was destroyed, I found that utterly horrendous. And it's the second thing here, which it's only, I don't know if I didn't consider it all that much. Well, I've got videos talking about it, and it's to do with Treblinka. It's the suffering of the people in the carriages, but above all, the suffering that happened in the summer of 1942. I know I've got videos when I mention this and I talk about this. I've got videos I uploaded 15, 16 years ago and I talk about this. But I spent 2 days at the railway station at Treblinka, and it was then thinking of these people who were arriving and the accounts of how they got, and in the heat, the how hot it was. 2 days ago, I drank 5 litres of water. Now these people, and I'm in a motorhome. I can take showers as often as I want. I've got plenty of water and don't have to worry about it. And that was something. I don't know, it really drove it home to me what it was like for those people in these wagons, often pushed in like people are in the underground systems at rush hour. That is something I found, I don't know, maybe I thought about it quite hard. Anyway, so I hope you've found that interesting. A walk in the forest next to Treblinka I. I've done other videos I've done lots of videos on the death camp and people involved with the death camp, and I'll upload videos on the quarry and the penal camp as well. So thanks for watching, and all the best from me in Poland.